Hello.
Hi there.
Boy, did you see your excitement when you joined us?
Oh, yes.
There was. We were afraid we weren't going to have a quorum.
I had to leave a meeting about scallops in the Eastern Bay in Maine.
Oh.
So if this gets boring, I'll go back to that one.
Tonight's going to be a fun-filled meeting. All right. So at least on my clock, it's 6:02. So I'd like to call the meeting to order. And first of all, thank everyone for coming out. We have a fairly robust agenda, so we'll get right into it. But I was looking at my notes, and I can't believe that tonight is our official 30th Library Building Committee meeting. 30, that's a lot. This is, I guess, our last meeting before the referendum will take place on Tuesday, November 2nd. And our next, obviously, will be on the 3rd following the referendum. So hopefully we're all feeling good on the 3rd. I guess with old business, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from October 6th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Lake, and a second by us. Any discussion on minutes? All in favor, please signify with an aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye, aye, aye. Any opposed or any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. And we'll go into new business. Maxine, do you have anything to report on the external outreach?
Yes, good evening, everyone. We met on October 9th at 8:30, and we basically continued our discussion regarding the different ways to get the information out about the library building project. So we're going to have display boards. There was a press release last week in the Messenger, some Messenger articles, and some social media blast.
Okay. Any questions, comments for Maxine and the committee? I just want to thank the committee. You guys have done a tremendous job of getting the word out over the last couple of weeks, and we have another almost 2 weeks to go, so I'm sure there'll be more information forthcoming, but we're putting the full court press on to make sure we get this passed on the 2nd. Okay. Leah is not here this evening, but she does not have anything to report. The committee did not meet. Mark, I don't know if you have anything under the construction manager?
No report.
Okay, great. So we'll turn it over to Elizabeth for our director's report.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to start off with sharing my screen to direct everybody to the Bloomfield Public Library website. Right at the top of the library website is a link to the Library Building Committee. If you click on that, you will be able to see all of our meeting minutes, meeting recordings, agendas, as well as all of the information that has come forth from the Library Building Committee. This is an excellent resource for people who have questions. You'll also see that right at the top, we have the image that we are showcasing in the libraries, 330 Park and Town Hall. And right below, we have a link directly to the press release that was released last week. The press release includes the exact wording of question 1 that people will see on the ballot come election day. It also has an estimated tax impact, and I wanted to read that out loud. The estimated tax impact on residents is as follows. If your house is assessed at $125,000, your taxes would increase $23.33 a year. That's $23.33 a year for 3 years. That's $1.96 per month for 3 years. If your house is assessed at $250,000, your taxes would increase $46.33 a year for 3 years. That's $3.86 a month for 3 years. This is also a great resource to share with people. When you're on our website, If you click on the countdown, which is we're only 12 days away, this brings you to the voting and citizenship resources on our website. The first link here is a sample ballot for Bloomfield. If you click on that ballot, it will show you exactly what you will see come election day. You can also sign up and register to vote right from this page. And it only takes a couple of minutes to do so. I also wanted to take a moment to read the mission statement for Bloomfield Public Library. Bloomfield Public Library aims to provide all members of our diverse community with access to comprehensive services, expansive print and electronic resources, technology, and expert assistance from a caring and responsive staff. By breaking down barriers to access and opening doors to opportunity, building community, and encouraging lifelong learning, BPL works to improve the quality of life for all of our residents and strives to be the heart of our town. I thought it would be of interest for everybody to know that as part of us sharing information about the Library Building Committee, last month we noted 104 website hits to the Library Building Committee page of our website. This month we're already at 343 hits. So we know people are coming and looking and trying to get access to information. I just wanted to reiterate that this is a 2 library building project. I wanted to also share that, as you all know, Prosser flooded and we had to close our doors on September 2nd because of water damage. On September 14th, we were able to open the 2nd floor of Prosser. And then on September 27th, we were able to open the youth department. At this time, the community room remains closed as we continue to address some of the issues from that day. I also wanted to note that September was library card sign-up month. Since the pandemic started, Bloomfield Public Library has signed up 804 people in Bloomfield, all residents, for library cards. And I wanted to note that library cards are free for everyone from birth. We look forward to continuing to serve the public in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Elizabeth on her report?
This is Jesse. I do have a question. Where can I get that information again about the tax commitment for the 3 years?
Yes. So when you go to our website, bplct.org, if you click on the Library Building Committee tab at the very top, you can find that information in the press release, which is the first link on that page.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And that information is right in the top of the press release.
Perfect. So for less than $5, no matter how, for less than $5 a month, for 3 years, I got 2 brand new libraries. Yes.
State-of-the-art 21st century libraries. That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Elizabeth? Okay. Well, want to thank Richard for joining us from TSKP tonight. We've asked him to present a project update, and we'll sort of talk a little chronology here, but I'm going to turn it over to Richard so that we kind of fine tooth nail about where we are and how we got to where we are. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Richard, who I imagine will want to share the screen.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Greg. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, I got a call from Mark recently who said, we'd like you to come to the building committee, and if you could prepare a presentation to summarize what we've done with the library committee. And so I dug into my archives of the many presentations that we've made to the committee and to the public, and pulled together this summary presentation that I would like to share with you this evening. I'm going to start first, I think, with this milestone timeline. And this was done in November of 2020, just about a year ago. And at that time, we had already had one kickoff meeting in October. We started investigating the town and see what kinds of sites might be available. But at that very early kickoff meeting, I was asked, can you pull together a schedule to get us to referendum? What are the major milestones that we need to hit in order to get there? And so this was one of my earliest cuts at that schedule. And as you can see, there are a number of milestones and a number of tasks, starting with the site selection process, site selection study. That's this red line that I'm highlighting right here. And there were a number of subtasks that we listed, but the big target was town council approval. And that we targeted to be July of 2021. Well, you hit that milestone. Congratulations. You hit probably every milestone that we had established in this early phase of the project. But some took longer than I had predicted, to be perfectly honest. Some, such as the programming and planning of the library, took a little bit longer. And that's because it was done very deliberately, very thoughtfully, with a number of people that were involved. So this red line that I had predicted back in November of 2020 actually took a little bit longer. But other milestone dates we hit perfectly, including the town council approval, including the letter that Elizabeth wrote, sending the letter of intent to the state for the grant application, and then actually filing the grant application. So well done. This was a long time coming. Part of that early process involved doing public survey work and program development. And with the collaboration of a number of very capable staff professionals, you brought in a consultant, Alan and Leslie Berger, who are very experienced in planning libraries. They're with a company called Library Development Solutions, and they guided you along the process of determining the kinds of square footage you would need, the kinds of spaces you would need to deliver a 21st century library building. They also helped design the survey that they issued to members of the public, because the public was engaged in that early planning as well. And so the kinds of things that you received in that survey work were reflected in the plan. And in the end, you are at this point. You've got a referendum question. The referendum date is November 20th. And I know there's a lot of fine print here. I don't expect viewers to be able to read all of this. So I highlighted some of the things here in yellow, and Elizabeth did point the critical components here, the $29.255 million for 2 library projects. And one of them is the new Prosser Library, approximately 28,000 square feet, plus renovations and an addition to the McMahon Wittenberry Library. And that building is approximately 9,000 square feet, both a combination of additions and renovations. It wasn't easy getting here. It took a lot of revision work and communication among all of the professionals and the committee members and a lot of volunteers who worked very hard in this process. But here's what we are presenting to the public now. You have 2 library projects, 2 library buildings, both of them to be approved on the same date. You'll end up with new features in the libraries, much more space, more technology. You can see by this list of bullets some of the major features in these new buildings. You've also shared a lot of information with the public. Before the meeting, I did go to the website. Elizabeth shared with you just a minute ago. It's very impressive, I have to tell you. It lists a lot of information, and I would encourage everybody to read through it because it is just rich with information, including a whole list of meetings that had occurred, the meeting minutes, the presentations that were done to various entities in town, the finance committee, the town council. We had meetings with the town planning department. We had, and then we had follow-ups after we got comments from those various entities. We then went back and presented again. You hired professionals to help guide you along the way, including Downs Construction. They did very careful cost estimating of both projects done together. I know there's a lot of information on this chart, so let me just grab the most important things. You have 2 projects, the Prosser Library, as you can see, approximately 28,000 square feet. The McMahon Library, approximately 9,000 square feet, a combination of additions and renovations. And one major line item here, which is the estimated hard costs. Those are the construction costs, roughly 18.4 for Prosser Library, a little over 5 million for McMahon. To that, you need to add soft costs, things like equipment, furniture, engineering, those kinds of things. Combined together, you end up with a total project cost of approximately 23 million for the Prosser Library and about 6.2 million for the McMahon Library. That, according to Downs, is a total of 29.254 million. I think the town council, in structuring the referendum question, just rounded it up to 29.255. That's how the number was derived. But we didn't come to that conclusion easily. Back in December of 2020, we didn't know where this library project was going to take place in the whole town. We didn't know that if we were going to do 1 building or 2 buildings or more. And so we started with the initial notions of the existing known conditions, where we knew that we had a site where the present Prosser Library is. We knew we had a site where the McMahon Library is, and we knew we had a town hall site as well. And there was thoughts, just like we did a few years earlier, consider that town hall as a site for the new library. But wait a minute, are there other sites? Sure, there are lots of other potential sites, and we got from the town planning department a whole list of parcels. And the green ones that you see highlighted here were all town-owned parcels. But when we looked at them closely, we could see that many were too small, many were in wetland areas. And so from this total list, we came up with a total of 7 parcels that we should take a closer look at. And those are pointed out in this map, as you can see. So how did we come up from that total list of 7 and narrow it down to 2? Well, together, the committee and we talked about what kind of criteria we would use to select a site. How would we narrow down this list? And as you can see here, we had yeses and nos according to each criteria, such as acquisition costs, whether there was adequate buildable land, whether there was room for expansion, whether it supported the town's development plan, and whether there were any specific site challenges. And so from this list of 7, we quickly narrowed it down to 3 and then ultimately 2. We discussed cost factors. What are the factors? You know, it's more than just construction costs. It's also site improvement costs. It's also furniture and equipment, moving expenses, swing space potentially. And at one point, we were even talking about mothballing expenses when we were talking about maybe not building on the Prosser Library site, in which case then we would have to encounter mothballing the Prosser building before a future use could be determined. All of that was taken into consideration when we looked at costs. And then I came up with a chart to try to help the committee narrow down based upon costs. And it became pretty apparent that the difference in cost between the Prosser site and the town hall site was not significant. I think some people felt, well, there could be a big savings if we go to the town hall site, but that's not the case. And I think the negative on the town hall site was that it really felt very, very cramped with very little room for expansion. And so we finally ended up with two sites. One is the Prosser site and the other is the McMahon Winterberry site. And very early we started with a conceptual plan showing that the Prosser Library should be oriented in this location, which is exactly where it currently is placed, except it should be expanded. And we should build it so that it is elevated above the floodplain in this area. We thought that placing the Prosser Library here in this location is a tremendous opportunity to strengthen the synergy that you have between the town hall, the center green, the First Congregational Church, and Philly Park as well. There's an opportunity to create pedestrian walkways among all of these major landmarks in the center of town. And the development in the center of town became a critical discussion about the location of the Prosser Library. I think in the end, this location will do a lot to enhance the center of Bloomfield. Of course, we know about the difference in elevation. In the future, you won't have those flooding issues because the building is going to be built higher. So you have an elevated first floor and then a second floor above that. And then there's a pedestrian walkway that would link across the Wash Brook. This is the brook that floods across the Wash Brook to a very large parking space on the former Riley lumber parcel. We looked at the exterior of the building. Right now, the building sits fairly low on its site, and my partner, Tai-Su, thought it would be important to raise that building up so that it's a more prominent feature in the center of town. And we started with, I'm not going to show you the very first design, because not long after we presented that first design, we then went through a round of alternative designs, trying to get the essence of what was important for this project. And so these are just some variety of sketches that were done. We listened very carefully to feedback from the public. And in the end, we came up with a slightly different strategy that was different from what we started with. We wanted to create a simple brick box, a simple masonry box, and have two white screens on two sides of the building. So it's a very simple architecture, very classic architecture. And this is a very quick sketch that Tai-Su did with his own hand, trying to illustrate the red brick that would be visible and with the white screen that's in front of it. This is a conceptual rendering. There's still a lot of work to be done in the design development of this project. This is the main floor of the library. One of the big changes that we made is we placed the grand stair that leads from this level up to the second level. We placed it in a very prominent location so people who go up the stairs have a view of the town center green across the way, and it shows a lot of activity in the library for people passing by. On the upper level, we have reading areas, we have resources, we have meeting rooms and staff rooms. And on the lower level, it's not an occupied level, it's parking and an entrance that leads to an elevator that goes directly up. The site plan has pretty much stayed the same as what we had developed in the very, very early concepts. One bit of good news was that the DOT is not going to be doing 2 roundabouts in the center of town. So this plan reflects the roads would end up being built once this building is completed. Okay, what about the McMahon site? We did study that extensively as well. And we always felt that the McMahon site had a great deal of potential, but one of the unfortunate architectural aspects of McMahon is that it is very blank on the exterior wall. Blue Hills Avenue is a very prominent street. It's a very important street, but this building is set quite far back from the street, quite far back from the sidewalk, and it just presents a blank wall. So we thought it would be important if this building is to be expanded, that it be expanded toward Blue Hills Avenue and that it be made more transparent. And that's what we did. So this diagram illustrates the site at the corner of Blue Hills Avenue and Rockwell Avenue. And you can see here in this diagram that there's a gray area, a shaded area that represents approximately 6,000 square feet of existing building. And then the unshaded area, which is the area in front, represents about 3,000 square feet of new construction at the McMahon Library. And the exterior appearance, we studied that quite a bit. Our first impression that we'd like to introduce a variety of materials, including wood on the exterior. But after some discussions with the committee and members of the public, we changed that to an all brick exterior, as you can see here. And the idea here is to open up the front so that it is visible to people on Blue Hills Avenue. You can see activity in the building, and it gives a fresher, more contemporary look. This is just another view of the McMahon as it will be in the future. And this is an enlargement showing that the vestibule entrance from the front is also a vestibule entrance from the parking in the rear, a very visible reception or circulation desk right in the middle of this footprint. Your sharing of information has continued. This is a very recent article. I think it was mentioned just a little while ago. That was in the Bloomfield Messenger, right there on the front page. Opportunity for Bloomfield to have libraries it deserves. And I agree. This is a very well-written article, gives you the highlights so that people, the public, can see the impact of this, these projects on their taxes, as well as the goals and the future of this library. Okay, what happens after the referendum? So you know that the referendum is on November the 2nd. That's only the beginning of the real project. This committee has spent over a year getting to this point. It's going to spend that much and more time actually fulfilling this project going forward. So this timeline, which was prepared by Downs Construction, shows that the referendum on November 2nd occurs here. The town of Bloomfield vote. And sometime in November or December at the latest, you will get notification of your library grant approval. And then we would continue with the details, the schematic design, design development. We would then take it through local approvals. That's planning and zoning, historic commission, building department, fire marshal, you name it. There's a lot of reviews that need to be done. And we would go out to bid for this with this project sometime in next summer, August of 2022. Construction wouldn't start until October, say October, November of 2022, and it would continue. These would be 2 projects being done concurrently, with the McMahon Library finishing after about 10 months and the Prosser Library finishing after about 16 months of work. So it took a long time to get here. I think you are in an excellent position. I thank you. I thank you all for the opportunity to be part of this very exciting project. And I'll be thinking of you all on November 2nd. Best of luck.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sure there are some questions or comments from the committee on your report. Thank you so much for that update. Anything from the body for Richard? And I can't see it.
Yes, Chair. I just wanted to mention that we did receive word from the state library saying that our construction grant has been evaluated and the final score was 20, which is above the minimum. And the state library board will be meeting on November 22nd and will know then about the $1 million grant for Bloomfield.
Great, thank you. Any hands up, Nancy? I can't see.
Yeah. I got my hand up, Nancy.
Oh, go ahead, Bob, sorry.
It's hard to see. Richard, could you stop sharing the screen temporarily?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Question I have is both for Richard and Elizabeth. If the two of you talked about and come up with an idea of how much space, temporary space is going to be needed, assuming the referendum passes, so we be thinking about where we might start looking?
At the staff level and with the board, we've started investigating that. And we will have ideas and recommendations moving forward. We haven't solidified anything at this point.
So you don't know how much space you may need? We'll figure that out.
Not at the moment, no.
Okay.
I can say that we are thinking of a multi-space approach and reaching out to the Board of Education and having pop-up libraries and doing something that may not be what other libraries have done in the in-between phase.
Thank you.
Lois?
I just wanted to clarify that you referenced the $1 million grant, but this is the first of 2 that we hope to get, right? And this one would apply to Prosser or to?
Okay. This is for Prosser.
Yes, the first grant was submitted for Prosser Library. You're only permitted to apply for 1 grant per year. And next summer, we will be submitting for McMahon Wittenberry Library as well for another $1 million from the state library.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, Richard, thank you so much. That was very comprehensive and a great chronology of where we started to where we are and where we need to get to. So thank you so much. Next, we have on a project update from Downs. Downs, do you want to update on where we are? I don't know if it's Tom, I saw Dave, Patrick.
Yeah, Greg, I'll kind of kick it off, and Scott has a report that we'd like to share. If he could share his screen and just kind of, get used to how we're going to prepare our reports, get some feedback, make sure that it's hits all the hot button items. But typically every meeting we will prepare a progress report, and Scott will go through the outline. Some of the outline stuff you're gonna see that it's gonna be to be determined. But I did appreciate Richard's update because it kind of gave me a little more perspective on the history of the project too, and some of the questions that we're likely going to be asking as we dive a little bit deeper into the schedule. Now we kind of got some answers already and can kind of see the roadmap a little bit clearer. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott, and he can go through our progress report.
Thanks, Tom. So as Tom mentioned, some of the agenda is going to say to be determined, particularly, with the financial summary, as we're not there yet. We'll have our schedule update, which at the moment we are working on our pre-construction schedule development. Richard showed a portion of that, an earlier version of that in his I'm sorry, I lost my words. His presentation. So we will have in the coming weeks all phases of the design process shown, as Richard showed: schematic design, design development, construction documents. One thing we need to go through with TSKP that we want to partner with them on is review of early bid packages that we mentioned in our interview. such as demolition, site work, concrete, and structural steel. Based on how the schedule is bid out in September and going from there, it's pushing some activities into the winter or into the dead of winter, particularly concrete, that we would like to try to avoid if possible. But in the same breath, you know, I'm very aware of the grant requirements with the bid process and the 30 days requirement with getting contracts into the state library. So I do want to be conscious of how that would be managed and how maybe we could achieve that. But that's something to definitely discuss further. Estimating activities for each design phase noted above, site logistics development for both projects, locate and state approvals, state traffic commission. So TSKP, Richard had mentioned that the rotaries are not going to be in place, but we still have to be wary of the fact that it's a state road and ensuring that the traffic commission is aware of what we're doing and any permits we need to get. Planning and zoning, wetlands, Department of Energy, environmental protection, LEED. I know that's something that may be a possibility as we go further. And I know there are requirements if you do LEED within the grant process that are important to submit the certificate upon completion. So that's something to think about. And then the building permit process. We want to put on our schedule important milestone activities related to the grant process, as I mentioned earlier. Bidding procedure requirements for the grant process, public outreach activities for bidding participation, and good neighbor meetings, which we've mentioned earlier that we do go out throughout the town or maybe on Zoom at this point for neighbor meetings. Any questions on the schedule outline, if you will? Okay. As far as the layout of the rest of our agenda, we'll show critical items for discussion. Draft contract will be submitted within 2 weeks for Downs. We'll have action items, which currently we don't have any action items, but these action items would entail proposed change order approvals, order of magnitude, pending revisions, which is during the construction process, if we feel that there is a potential of a cost that may be unknown, we're going to let you know about that, and we're going to track that and see if it, that cost is going to come to fruition or if it's going to be something that we are able to get around. But we're always updating you on the budget and what potential risk or pending costs there could be. So that's our order of magnitude pending revisions items. And then October requisitions for approval, which currently we don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Can I just add requisitions for approval for those of you that have not sat on our building committee meetings? For other building committees, that's their application for payments.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Any further questions?
Yeah, Scott, Greg here. I just wanted to find out a little information about the MBEs. I mean, will there be regular reporting as to what efforts are taking place and how things are lining up once we go out for bid?
Yes, and we'll be working with our subcontractors and their subcontractors on how that will be determined and brought to fruition during the bid process. Yeah, we will have a spreadsheet that tracks that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Greg, we'll do a number of outreaches prior to even going out to solicit bids. I have talked to Dwight a few times, and once we get on board and we get past the referendum and we get probably into the DD phase of the project where we'll be able to start crafting some packages, we will present a plan, a couple of different renditions of the plan to make sure that we do get some feedback from the trades and from the local community as well. It's meant to be an inclusive process and a transparent process.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments for the Downs team?
Scott, you can stop sharing your screen. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. One last opportunity before we move on. Okay, great. Just want to thank both TSKP and Downs for your help thus far. We're very excited and looking forward to our next meeting, which will really determine sort of the fate of where we are and where we're going. So thank you all again. Oh, the other thing I want to mention to make sure that, Nancy, can we disseminate both reports by TSKP and Downs to the committee following the meeting?
Yes,
And,
Scott, if you could email me the report, that'd be great. I already have TSKPs. So once that gets Downs, I'll forward both.
Okay. And I'm assuming they'll both be on the website so that the public will have access to that information?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Nancy, we're going to segue into you for the approval of invoice.
Yes. Those beautiful signs that you now see in our public buildings, and also on the renderings that show up on the town's website and the library's website. We had a vendor prepare those for us, and it's fast signs. The cost was $596.38. So I would ask you to approve it. And before anyone wants to know, we have about a little under $11,000 left in the budget before the referendum. So there's plenty of money in the budget to pay for this invoice.
Nancy, did you say 11,000 or did you mean 11?
Yeah, it said 11,000 when I looked it up today. I thought it was lower, but it said 11,000.
Okay.
I can verify that, but there's certainly more than $596.
Okay.
My understanding was that we were going to save some of that for TSKP. Did we talk about that? In case they had to do more work in order to show what the plans were going to look like. I just remembered talking about excess in the budget, maybe using some of it that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Okay, well, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Ike, is there a second?
I'll second with the question.
Okay, discussion, questions.
Yeah. Nancy?
Yes.
What I have says $560.77.
I sent a revised one out this afternoon, so I'm looking at the old one. So the revised one, is that the one that you're looking at? The one that I sent out earlier? That would be the correct one, Bob.
Thank you. All right. Bob, you and I are removing $560.77, correct?
Correct.
All right. Any more questions or comments on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. And Lois, I apologize. I saw your hand up. Did you have a question? Lois.
I can address it in the comment period.
Okay. All right, great. Again, as mentioned earlier, our next meeting is on November 3rd, and then we'll meet again on the 17th of November. And we're going to segue into comments from the committee. So Lois, you're up.
Thank you. When we worked on the schools, we had an owner's representative in addition to a construction manager at risk. Have we talked about doing that in this case?
We've budgeted for it.
We have.
Yes.
And what is the system for selecting that person?
It would be the same process that we went through to hire a construction manager. We would issue an RFP. They probably have one of the subcommittees review the responses and conduct interviews by the full building committee and make their recommendation to the town manager.
So we would wait until after the referendum to do that?
Yes.
Because I think it ought to be soon after the referendum.
Okay. All right.
The other question that I have is the having a full committee, because as we get into having to approve, there's going to be a lot of decisions to make. And we really need to have a full committee in order to get those made, I think, in case there are the occasional absence or vacation. Have we talked about how to deal with that?
Yes, Lois, we've had some conversations with the mayor who makes the appointments to the committee. And my guess is at our next meeting, there'll be more information as to there is at least one vacancy or open spot on the committee. And we'll address that and any other potential appointments to be made. So that will be happening shortly. Any other committee comments? Bob?
Yeah, thank you. Just to piggyback with Lois's, I know we have an opening currently right now. Does that opening need to be Democrat, or Republican, or an unaffiliated? Which two?
It's my understanding, and again, it's subject to change, but it's a non-Democrat.
Correct.
Okay.
So that'd be for a minority seat, could either be a Republican or unaffiliated voter.
Correct. All right. Jesse?
Yes, a couple of things. One, I'm just, as I listened to Richard talk about the timeline and everything that we have done so far, I just couldn't help but, sit back and think about like the progress that's been made. And so I'm very, very excited, elated, overjoyed about, the way that things have gone. And thank you so much, Richard, for that. And then secondly, I just want to put it out there already. November 3rd is my wife's birthday. And so I more than likely will not be at the next meeting if I want to stay married for another, 18, 19 years. So with that said, I won't be there, but I'm just very, very happy to be a part of this group. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm looking to see if there are any other hands. Any other comments from the committee? Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay, hearing none. Public comments.
Yep. The first one is Linda Pagani. Go ahead, Linda, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. First of all, kudos to Elizabeth and the library staff and any other town employees who are involved in creating the tab and the landing spot for all the information on the library building projects on the BPL website. It's really an amazing resource. So thank you very much for that. The other thing, the main thing I want to say is how much I strongly support the 2 library building projects and the $29.3 million appropriation to fund them. That's on the November 2nd ballot in question 1. It's exciting to think about what these 2 state-of-the-art buildings will bring to the community and to our quality of life. And I hope the referendum passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next, we have Sten Casperson. Go ahead and unmute yourself and start.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Greg. I also want to add my wish for referendum success. The town of Bloomfield needs a new and a renovated library. And I look forward to the building rendering evolutions that will follow the referendum with both Taisu Kim and Downs Construction. Good luck, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sten. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? You can raise your hand. No one else.
No one else. Okay, great. This has been a great meeting, very informative. And before we adjourn, I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone. I know I mentioned it at the beginning of the meeting, but tonight is our 30th full committee meeting. And we've had close to 50 subcommittee meetings. And I say all that to say that this has been a hardworking group. And we could not be in the place we are without everyone's time, energy, and effort. And on behalf of the town, I just want to thank everyone on our committee for your tireless work and for all your input. And Nancy, thanks to you and other folks on staff, and Elizabeth, you and your team. Really takes a village, and we've done, in my opinion, done a tremendous job. And I am optimistic and hopeful that November 2nd will go well, and we will all be in a good place on November 3rd at our next meeting. So again, thank everyone for your work. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you,
a good night,
Greg.
everyone.